Hello, I wanted to jump on today and talk about the Mercury-Jupiter new phase conjunction that's happening. And it's so potent because of the long-term Mercury retrograde that we just finished that happened in the sign of Cancer, really over the last, what feels like 2 months. And 2 months, I say, because of the pre-retrograde shadow and the post-retrograde shadow, but the quality of time that Mercury retrograde in Cancer created was deeply confusing emotionally. And I think the confusion sets in for people who are neurodivergent, people who are self-proclaimed sensitives. And I don't really talk about this very much on my channel, and I haven't, because I have always endeavored to make or present astrology as kind of a unified field that will be kind of the same for everyone. But I think part of my reckoning in the Mercury retrograde in Cancer that we went through was returning to the self-compassion, returning to the necessary ingredients for growth that we see in Cancer, of unconditional love, not even just of you towards yourself, but appreciating it from other people and also giving it to other people. And where Mercury comes into this is the rationalized expression of that, right? The linear expression of unconditional love, the linear expression of nonlinear support, of recognition that things don't always happen linearly. And I think everyone needs that type of support, but I think it is difficult for many of us who are neurodivergent, who are autistic, ADHD, whose brains and bodies truly do not work in the same way as maybe the world expects them to, and the world is created for. So I think Mercury retrogrades definitely heighten sensitivities around communication, around speech. And it's a time like this where Mercury is direct. Mercury is in its new phase to Jupiter now. And we are in touch with our own personal beliefs again. And we are around the bend, beginning a new chapter, beginning a new journey of finding the words to articulate our belief instead of questioning our belief because we don't have the words for it, which I think was a big phase, a big expression of the Mercury-Jupiter closing conjunction, which was happening in Cancer for the most part. That closing conjunction, which is called a balsamic conjunction, is very much so about the end. And similar to a Piscean theme, the end, things move apart, things let go, things are not certain in the balsamic or in the Piscean worlds. It doesn't feel calcified or clarified in that balsamic phase of Mercury and Jupiter. And now that they are in the new phase, we all are feeling that the pursuit of finding the words to articulate our beliefs about ourselves is fresh, it's new, and it's happening. And it is in stark contrast to the Mercury-Jupiter balsamic conjunction in Cancer. And I stress, and I'm going back to this idea now about how when we're neurodivergent, autistic, ADHD, any of these labels that we put on ourselves that actually accurately describe how we feel inside. This past Mercury retrograde was really could have been very difficult because the let's say the expression of Mercury in Cancer, which I have this, it's very nonlinear thinking. It's very much waves crashing in and out, and that's how we rationalize, or rather that's how the archetype of a Mercury in Cancer native might experience life, might experience the linearity of life, is actually waves crashing in and out. That's that Mercury Cancer. And so when Mercury goes retrograde in Cancer, it's kind of like being in a tidal wave, like a tidal pool, a whirlpool. And it's enormously difficult to articulate our intentions in a way that will be understood and believed by, and fit rather into the world outside of us. And so during that Mercury retrograde, it almost got worse because those of us who already kind of think in nonlinear fashions were kind of pulled under the deep end. And I think my personal experience was I returned to a lot of love and support from my family. Like, no joke. It was really a Cancerian experience that I deeply appreciate, but it returned me to this idea that true growth has to happen from like slow nurturing and really gentle kindness. And of course, there needs to be enough structure in order for that to work, but we can't be so hard on ourselves, and we need to allow ourselves to be who we are. And I think that piece of allowing ourselves to be who we are is what's coming up now with the Mercury Jupiter new phase in Leo, because now we are able to go off and research what are the right words to say about what we truly believe about ourselves. And we probably are tapped into something about what we believe in ourselves, not only because Jupiter is in Leo, but because Jupiter is near the South Node in Leo now as well. And there can be two expressions of this Jupiter approaching the South Node, which is definitely far of a conjunction right now, but they're co-present. And so everything's starting to intermingle. What I can say to this is the South Node, while I don't like talking about it as though it's a drain, it can feel enormously draining if we are not approaching it in the right way. We need to gather a lot of strength in order to be with our South Node and in order to pull up the relevant experience that exists within our past that's ready to be brought into the present moment with the South Node. So with Jupiter, this is about belief in ourselves. And so if we have ever chronically lacked belief in ourselves, Jupiter South Node can really make us feel deeply connected to that lack of belief in ourselves. But I think that because of the trine to Saturn right now, there's a growing strength in your capacity to pull yourself up out of the idea of that South Node as a whole and really see it as a deep place where there's some type of buried treasure. So this is going to only continue to get better in terms of how we are analytically being able to describe who we are and describe this process of pulling our identity out of this deep hole that it has been being kind of pressed like a diamond, I feel. And that's going to be when Mercury moves into Virgo next week. The sun's going to move into Virgo this weekend. There's a lot of clarity and direct one-to-one expressions that are about to come up. And I'm really excited about it because of what we've come through in this Mercury retrograde in Cancer experience. So I just wanted to go in and express this because I'm feeling it so directly correlated in my life that period over the last 2 months of the retrograde was deeply mentally challenging for me. And now as we're moving out of it, I am really appreciating linearity a whole lot more. I've been reading so many books, and I realized that's a really great way to find linearity in life when we feel linearity is not coming out of us. And it's not to say that linearity is the goal, but it is to say that linearity is helpful when we are feeling socially isolated, when we can read a string of sentences and actually fully comprehend it, or even when we can listen to someone else's thoughts. And I think the more you step into actually having to process the thoughts and not just consume them. So that's why I say reading a book, but it could also be listening to lectures, anything like that. This is where it is so helpful, I think. And I think that's what I have been finding, and that's the advice I'm going to give myself any of these next times I fall into a whirlpool of not being able to mentally really move beyond myself. And I'm very excited because this new phase between Mercury and Jupiter is so exploratory and so instinctual. And it's an amazing time to be talking about what you believe in. And what else are we supposed to be doing right now? So I would love to hear if anyone watching has been feeling this shift of Mercury, or any other thoughts, questions, comments, or concerns. I'll be happy to stay on for a few minutes here if we get into a chat, but otherwise, no worries. I just wrote on my Substack a little bit of a reflection about independent academia, like being an independent researcher. And that is a YouTube video that kind of came into my consciousness right around this last weekend, even, really. And it somehow really was helpful, and like gave me a lot of more self-belief when it comes to how to not only legitimize your own process of rationalization, but also how to feel empowered to contribute that to the world, and really take the entirety of your idea and share it, instead of just trying to make viral clips and bits, which I think may be part of my challenge over the last several months, is because I've been so much on social media, or rather a lot of my intellectual work has been about creating content for social media, and there's been a lot of whiplash. So returning to your own process of analytical research, not in an overbearing, oppressive way, but in a way that keeps you streamlined on your intrinsic motivation, rather than on a motivation that is top down. And I do think for me, it's taken like 12 years of being out of an academic institution for me to come kind of full circle back and appreciate linearity. So if nobody has anything they want to jump in and share, I'll probably sign off. But I'm, again, excited about Mercury moving into Virgo next week, about the sun moving into Virgo. This is truly my favorite time of year, the start of the quote unquote school season. And I am certainly starting up my own curriculum again. And I encourage you to do so as well if the Mercury function feels important in your life to reclaim. So thank you very much. And until the next time, I shall see you again. Oh, hi, Owen. Jupiter, Owen asks, I've only just arrived. Is Jupiter and Mercury combined with eclipse perfect for a greater... Good question. Perfect for a great career surprise. I think really, yeah, potentially. Jupiter and Mercury. I think this eclipse in general, because it's going to be squared by Uranus. That's going to be next Thursday evening into Friday, but that's US time, so maybe Friday for you. Yeah, I'm not sure if I would go out to say career surprise. Well, maybe, now that I think about it, because of Uranus. As long as your career in this like realm has a teaching element, or an element of, which I know yours does, or whatever the career you're going for is, yeah, I would say so. But it has to be very self-directed, and there has to be a lot of self-belief involved, or at least demonstrated and expressed, I think. And I'm sure something like that might fit for you. So why not? Yeah. Cool. Well, I hope you're doing well, Owen. Thanks for writing. And if there's any other thoughts here, what about this in between eclipse twilight zone? Is this a special time? Great question. I have been appreciating this idea of fucking around and finding out. Apologies for my French. I think that the more you think about it, the less special of a time it might be, because the magic kind of happens when you forget. So I do think it is a special time, but I think it's a special time to be so alive in your life. And the other thing is, not all eclipse seasons and not all eclipses and not all eclipse seasons will always produce crazy results. Like, I really do think it depends on where the eclipse is falling. I like the idea of an eclipse twilight zone. So I think it really kind of depends on how you are experiencing it within yourself. I don't really like this this trend we have in astrology that like names periods of times, because I think it takes away some of our own right to self-determination in some sense. And truly, it's not always more or less special. So you can say astronomically it certainly is special, and this is a cool lunar cycle for sure. But yeah, I don't know, that's what I'd say. I'm a little bit not so enthusiastic about hyping so many things up in astrology these days, but I am enthusiastic about hyping up ourselves and our creative process, which definitely this is a time astrologically that would point to us doing so. But I would also say that the hype of this time is really more for me coming through the Jupiter-Saturn trine, which we're going to get one hit of next week, and then we're going to get 2 hits next year. And so I really do also lean into this bigger chapter rather than it just being this week. We had a total solar eclipse in 1999, and I feel like that one and this one's are bookends for a 27-year duration. Are you detecting any eclipse epochs too? Oh, interesting. Well, I've just turned 30, so this is basically my whole life. And I could say that I definitely feel like an epoch has ended and a new one is beginning. 27-year duration. I wonder where that number is coming from. You said just for a total solar eclipse, and then you mean the last total solar eclipse that we had. Yeah, there are certainly epochs in life, and I think also that 27 to 30-year cycle is deeply about the Saturn structures that we move through, and the eclipses are kind of just the portals that we'll walk through to really cement and solidify these cycles. Because the eclipse cycles, what I think about with eclipse cycles are more like 18-year and 9-year cycles, because that's how long it takes for the eclipse to do, or for the nodes to do complete reversals and returns. So that seems to be the time. So I guess for now, 2026, we would have to take 18 years before right now. I can't do math that quickly. Let me think. 26 minus 18 is 2008. Oh, wow. That was the financial crisis back then. Yeah, I mean, and it was also when Pluto just entered Capricorn, and I don't know exactly where Saturn was at that time, but certainly 18-year epochs. And so 30 again feels more like a Saturn timeline, 27 to 30, 18, which, you can go to half of 18, which is 9, and also look at that, which would be 2017. So 2017 was also a big year. I don't know in the world globally, but for me, that was also a very big year, 2017, in terms of fated encounters, because that's kind of the idea of the eclipses, is there's fated things. And of course, Saturn is very fated as well. But that might be all I say, just for the sake of time today. But thank you for these thoughts, Owen. Yeah. let's see this. So this opening trine would be initiatory and motivating, therefore. Yeah, totally. And I think because it's also happening around this eclipse, we're entering a big time over the next year. Really, it's over this next year. And that is a lot of the North Node Aquarius, South Node Leo time over the next 18 months that we coincide with that planet, that nodal transit with the Jupiter Saturn trine, with Jupiter being on the South Node, with North Node nearing to Pluto. And so there's a lot of movement. But I think what I will say is that we're not fully out of the Virgo Pisces eclipse axis just yet, of course, because this upcoming eclipse is Pisces, but also because the year is one final Virgo eclipse that will happen in February of next year. It'll be very, very wide eclipse with the North Node in Leo, with the North Node in Aquarius and the South Node in Leo, but the eclipse itself will be in Virgo, like the moon will be in Virgo. And so it won't be until February of next year that I think we fully kind of move out of the Virgo Pisces eclipse axis and fully step into whatever's going to fully move and shake with the Aquarius Leo axis, if that makes sense. And so we're very much so between worlds still right now, between the worlds of the Virgo Pisces and the Leo Aquarius, which has everything to do with what are our personal rituals, what are our personal beliefs, and how are our personal rituals and beliefs moving us into the future and allowing us to really, really be who we are, right? And I think that whole thematic is really going to be live at this upcoming lunar eclipse in Pisces, but we are also, moving into February with that. Oh, I was going to say this lunar eclipse in Pisces to me really has everything more to do with the Virgo. I'm going to emphasize this in my next weekly video, you'll see, but everything has to do with our hands, with our dexterity, with our analytical mind, with the rationalization. And that's kind of what I meant to stress in this video. If you're just watching, you can maybe rewatch the earlier part where I talk about Mercury and Jupiter, and Mercury is retrograde in Cancer when Jupiter was in Cancer. And now that they're both in new phase to each other in Leo, it's much easier to express who we are, to explore the different words and the different articulations with Mercury of the belief of who we are, which is Jupiter. And in that new phase, they're growing, and they'll be in that new phase even at this next eclipse. It'll be ruled by, anyway, Mercury is just so important really for the next 20 years because, well, that's not true, at least for the next 8 years, because Mercury will rule Uranus, which rules Pluto. And so Mercury and this cognitive function and the function of being rational and articulating things in order and following linearity, that's really the name of the game right here. And so that the fact that we're going into next year in February with the last eclipse in Virgo is quite significant, I think, right? Like that shift of Virgo Pisces to Aquarius Leo. We really have to be in touch with what our devotional practices are for what our truth is so that we can move forward into the future authentically. I hope that makes sense. This is very sweet. Thank you. Yes, 888 right now. Okay. If there are no more thoughts or questions, I might dip, but this has been lovely. Thank you very much. And yeah, bye for now.